This is one of the things I love about the gaming industry. You have all of these people who want to work together across multiple platforms, bringing their youth and their energy and their excitement into the industry. Now, we have to move on, though, to something a little bit more serious: funding. It's a bit of a forgotten secret, but there are people out there who want to fund you, and they are right here in Africa wanting to be your friend. So Bhavanesh from the IDC will now outline how you can get funding from them and what they want from you in return.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for listening into our presentation. My name is Bhavanesh Parbhoo, and I work for the Industrial Development Corp of South Africa for a team called Media and Audiovisual. Thanks for your time, and I'm just doing a short presentation on gaming and interactive media. So, I'm going to run through just a high level as to what the IDC is and, what context we have in the greater industrial kind of journey of South Africa. And then I'll delve into a bit more as to how we fund gaming and, what it is that we're looking for. So, firstly, this is, just running through exactly what we're doing over here. So, who the IDC is, what we do, why we're interested in gaming, how we fund. I'll run through a couple of examples of game titles and game studio funding, and then just, I think, finally, what we want to see more of. So I think basically this is just an outline of the presentation. So, just firstly, a bit of background as to the IDC. We're a state-owned company. We're owned by the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, formed about, 1940, so about 80 years ago. And we're charged with economic growth and industrial development here in South Africa. So that's basically taking industries and catalyzing them, moving them to the next level, or finding new industries to grow within the country. The areas that we predominantly fund in is manufacturing, energy, tourism, mining, agro-processing, so down the line kind of agriculture, and then quite a bit into services, so ICT services and ad hoc services such as media services, which is the unit that I sit within. A couple of principles as to how we fund. We're a self-funded organization, so we don't get any allocation from the national fiscus. Rather, we invest funds into various entities, and on the returns we generate from those entities, we then on-lend onto new businesses. Basically, we're like a commercial bank. So, we operate as if we are a top tier commercial bank, but we have a development hat. We have a balance sheet of about $15 billion. So that gives a bit of size as our context. And we operate predominantly within South Africa, but we invest into SADC and the rest of Africa as well. As to what it is that our unit does, so our media and AV unit, we've got a mission which is pretty bold, that we'd like to be the driving force of development of a sustainable media and AV chain within South Africa. So it's not only creating the chain but making it sustainable as well. The areas that we fund into is content, so anything that you see on a television screen or on theater, into infrastructure, so studios, radio stations, newspaper businesses, and the like, into platforms, so the delivery of actual digital media assets to an audience, those platforms, we fund that, and interactive media, so any form of gaming or audiovisual, augmented reality, virtual reality, and the assorted kinds of digital media assets. A couple of our notable investments: Cape Town Film Studios. I think a lot of you guys sitting out there in Cape Town will be quite familiar with those studios. There's a Skyring Studios up in Johannesburg, which is a post-production studio facility. The MSG Africa Group, which is a radio-owning media asset, which has two pretty big radio licenses in the Eastern Cape and Gauteng. A couple of our content examples would be Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom, Tsotsi, and then on the animation side, Zambezi and Kumba. So that just gives a bit of a flavor as to the types of investments we've made in the past. So, you'd have noticed in that previous slide that we've not We've not invested in gaming as yet, although we've done quite a bit of investigations into how to invest in the space. So, why exactly? So from a numbers point of view, the metrics kind of tick up. We're dealing with an industry which is pretty massive. It's $160 billion in, to date. So this figures from about 2019. In 2019, gaming revenues were 4 times box office revenues, 3 times music revenues, and this was pre-COVID revenues. Within SA, we're dealing with a $2 to $3 billion industry and about 11 million gamers. So the metrics tick up to say that this is interesting and this is a space that we should be looking at. Couple of positives that we've seen from the space: labor costs within the continent, but within SA itself are quite competitive as compared to the some of the costs that are coming out from traditional gaming markets. We've got pretty strong infrastructure, whether it's like connectivity or associated kind of infrastructure, which lends itself into gaming. It's pretty strong. The currency works in our favor, and that's not just SA specific. If you look at currencies across the continent, they all work within our favor. Strong English working force. The gaming industry has succeeded largely without any government intervention, which is it's a sign of something which is really positive. It has the ability to then catalyze and move even forward. And then when you're looking at the kind of pillars of game development, whether it's like software, animation, project planning, business sense, and whatnot. We're pretty strong in a couple of those areas, animation, software development, because of links back into our strong fintech industry, for instance. So, there's very, very cool positives which can work off. There's obviously areas that require strengthening, such as, treating gaming as a proper industry, the business around it, as well as project management within the space. So dealing with gaming as a finite project with milestones and deliverables. Benefits to SA, and again, I keep caveating my talk in that we're looking at SA, but we're interested in the continent as well. So creative arts as a whole is a big space for which the youth are interested in. So it's gaming is one space which just ties into that entire narrative, and it lends to the issue, which is a South African and African issue of large amounts of youth unemployment. We're dealing with a remote workforce, so in COVID times we've seen the benefit of industries, or those industries which were more geared up to working remotely, how they've really really bloomed and blossomed in this time. Gaming has the added advantage of bringing in significant FDI into the continent. It links nicely between media and technology, which is it's a cool spin. If we're trying to push innovation, if we're trying to push this agenda of like low-tech iterative innovation and whatnot within the continent, gaming forms a nice link between technology on the one hand and media, and that ties into the point I have right at the bottom about education and training. Gaming isn't just about gaming; it has spin-offs into maths, into various applications of engineering, AI, machine learning. It has applications which are widespread. So the more we invest in this, the wider these kinds of benefits roll out. So how is it that we as a development funding institution, how do we fund? A couple of principles which we look at is, one, we look to co-fund. So if we're investing into a transaction, we'd like there to be some sort of other partner sitting in with us, either in the form of an equity partner or another risk partner taking on debt, or maybe there's someone coming in with some sort of grant funding. We like it when we see other people coming in with money as well. We love working in partnership, so we understand that we come with a pretty strong finance hat. We work with entrepreneurs who are particularly skilled in what they do, but it's this idea of partnerships and understanding that not everyone is the master of all domains. We need to be working with people who are masters in specific spaces and bringing these kinds of individuals together to form good partnerships. We look for good jockeys. So, whenever we invest in a business, we understand, it's cliched, but it's 100%. We invest in the entrepreneur. If an idea is rock solid, if everything around an idea is fantastic, but the actual entrepreneur itself is lacking maybe in terms of certain skills or integrity or not being able to pull together things in the best manner, a project fails very easily. So we look for good jockeys. We are in essence cash flow funded. So what we look for is strong cash flows, if as opposed to a deposit taking bank which looks to strong security. Not that we don't take security, but we rather look for strong cash flows and we lend to those cash flows. We like working with proven concepts. So, given the nature of our balance sheet and the funding available to us, we don't necessarily want to be dealing with prototyping. We'd like to be dealing with the stage where there's a concept that's proven, there's some sort of market appetite, and we are in essence taking that concept and trying to scale and accelerate it. The floor that we lend to is R1 million, so we don't write checks anything below that, and our checkbook writes up to about R1 billion rand. So it's a pretty wide space. Those metrics kind of change within the continent. So at present, within parts of Africa, we wouldn't write checks below $3 million. But those are always up for negotiation. So how do you access IDC funding? And I find the best way of explaining this to people is that we've got in essence two levers. Lever number one is financial viability. You brought us a project. Do the numbers basically stack up? So do the cash flows stack up? Do the cash flows kind of allow for the lending that's required? Are the growth assumptions making sense? So, are you predicting something which makes sense within the context? Is it in line kind of with CPI? If it's outside of CPI kind of growth, are there strong metrics to justify why you want to lend in that space? Do the unit economics make sense? So, simple example, we're dealing with roughly 11 million gamers here in South Africa, just in this country alone. If you're predicting that, you're going to create a game and sell 3 million titles just here in SA, those numbers simply don't stack up at all. So do the unit economics make sense? And finally, is there risk or equivalent risk sharing? We're coming in as a financier. Are there other parties, including the sponsor itself, sharing risk? So that's kind of lever number one to our funding. The second lever is the project society relevant? So we deal or we live in a certain environmental context, where there are issues of environmental issues, there are societal issues within which we exist. Is your business addressing something within that space? So, for instance, employment. Are you dealing with an issue of creating additional employment within the country? Are you dealing with issues such as youth employment, for instance? Are there women participating in your business? Are the youth participating from an equity or from a shareholding point of view? Are we dealing with inclusion of PDIs within the structure? Are you replacing imports? So we're a country which is notoriously being an import kind of driven economy, where we continuously bring in goods, services, and those sorts of things. Are you creating relevant tech which is replacing that? It's something which we can export. And finally, are you creating something which potentially is new? It's dealing with new skills. It's dealing with something which is tangibly South African or African, and it's lending to some sort of wider societal context and relevance. So, the process of funding which we apply at the moment is an entrepreneur would then inquire with us either via our digital platform or directly with our walk-in centers. We do a high-level assessment. Does this thing make sense from an overarching kind of context and perspective? Thereafter, we do something called a basic assessment. Basically, what this is a high-level fit for mandate and economic viability, which is tested by our individual departments. So I work for a media audiovisual department. We'd sit and we'd look at this from a basic assessment point of view. It takes about 2 weeks roughly to get to that stage. Assuming we get past the basic assessment stage and we'd like to move on to due diligence and commit resources to a transaction, we'd assign a small team which looks at various disciplines: marketing, technical, financial, legal, the corporate governance structures, as well as the actual available skills within the entity. And we do a focused DD on that transaction and create a model and a paper which we take to an investment committee. This investment committee independently looks at this transaction and assesses whether or not is it pulling the two levers of financial viability and societal relevance. Assuming we get a yes from that committee, we go to legal closure. So we sign various legals. We enforce the conditions for draw and we disperse. Again, just touching on what we do from a due diligence point of view, financial risk, marketing risk. So, are the unit economics ticking up to what we're seeing in the market? Are you pricing your product properly? Are there relevant technical risks in terms of delivery, in terms of technical specs, in terms of licenses and whatnot, all being dealt with? And is the management team strong enough? Is the management team competent enough to deal this transaction? And finally, are the various legal risks being met? Post our investment, and we handhold clients quite a bit. There's ongoing monitoring, so either monthly or quarterly, to check, are you in line with your budgets? Are you in line with the various development goals that you had set out? So if you were going to create 10 jobs, how far along the line are you in doing that? We offer quite a bit of business support as well. So if a transaction comes in and we feel we need to run some sort of diagnostic, maybe to bulk up areas such as you need additional support on an accounting or a legal kind of side of your business, we can inject those kinds of skills and resources into your business. General funding terms. So the instruments that we have are pretty wide ranging. It starts all the way from asset-backed senior, so for contracts and those sorts of things. If you need working capital, senior kind of debt, if there's contract financing that you require, and then moving on to, I suppose, more of the patient and albeit a bit more risky transactional instrument types, either MES type facilities or equity facilities. The general terms, on the debtish type of instruments that we have, we're generally looking at 3 to 5 years. Working cap probably around 4 years for the contract facilities. It's obviously to the contract term. Where things have a bit of a longer tail, so on the MES and the equity type instruments, we can stretch a bit further, so 3 to 7 years. And the various costs are lending. So, as again, we're not a deposit taking institute, so it's not like we have access to mass scale of low cost debt. We go out, we raise these funding on the international markets. On the senior facilities, we're looking at about prime and 2 to 5%, prime plus 2 to 5%. On the MES type facilities, we're looking at returns of about 13%. We do have various schemes that kick in now and then. So at present, we've got a Grow Youth scheme, which provided you meet certain job criteria and there is equivalent youth shareholding in your business, we can lend to you at up to prime less 3%. So let's look at funding of a studio. You've got a gaming studio, for instance, or you've got a virtual reality studio, an augmented reality studio, or any type of studio which is creating some sort of digital media asset. What are those things that we're looking for? Firstly, does your team have some sort of track record? You've got relevant experience in the space. It might not be the full gambit of experience, across like legal or corporate governance or whatnot, but you've got relevant experience in trying to sell the core thing that you would like us to fund. What kind of experience do you have from a management point of view? Are there other funders on board? So, are other people co-funding with us? Are you, as the entrepreneur, actually putting in money yourself? And I think finally, just overall, does the business plan just make sense? Far too often, guys come to us and say, we've got the next best thing. We've got the next Facebook, we've got the next this, we've got the next that. And when you do just simple interrogation of the actual business plan, it simply does not stack up. People get pretty, defensive to say, you're a government funding, a government institution. You need to be helping and catalyzing and assisting. But, that's not what we're there for only. We're there to do it sensibly. So the overall sensibleness of a business plan needs to tick up 100%. What is it that we'd fund? So for a particular studio, the actual infrastructure. So, whether it's the hardware in the actual premises, maybe you need some sort of networking capability, connectivity, those sorts of things, the infrastructure, and capitalizing an actual office. Those are things that we fund. Software, so whether it's licenses or perhaps you want to create your own software. These are things we can look at. Do you have a working capital need? So staffing, operational needs. We can help fund those. Again, we're not limited to casual games, so we like to focus on serious games as well. So moving into the ed tech, learning, training space, we're quite focused and we're quite interested in that space as well. We think the value proposition over there is actually excellent. And then esports itself. So, in the esports space, whether it's like an esports arena or esports type of business that you're bringing, we can look at it. What we're avoiding is, heavy startup losses. So if you've given us a projection for the next 2 to 3 years, and you're dealing with massive amounts of startup losses, which you want us to cover, we can look at it, but I think more often than not, our stance is that we'd like you as the entrepreneur to kind of take care of those initially, and we come in once, those are kind of taken care of. If there's excessive management fees, again, we're funding people whose businesses are going to make them a lot of money. So we expect some sort of concomitant risk sharing. And, heavy R&D, again, not what we're looking at funding. We want proven concepts. So, just to highlight, and I think just embellish the example a bit more. So, here's an example. It's an existing studio. In the past, they've successfully delivered content either to the local or international market. It may not even have been a game. It could have been just content that they created for a bank, for instance. It's not heavily geared, so there's no big kind of debt sitting on their balance sheet. They now want to take on more work. So, they need funding to now grow and scale their business. And, they're creating jobs, they're creating tech which might be locally relevant and whatnot. That's a perfect example of what we want to fund. What's a maybe? So, it's a new co, and they've done some sort of client delivery. So they've got some sort of track record. We can look at it. We're happy to look at it. What's a no? So, if someone comes in and says, I'm going to make the next Fortnite. Well, what experience do you have? Nothing. I just play Fortnite. Well, no. Well, no, thank you. Thanks for the interest, but not interested. If there's heavy type of prototyping that you require funding for, we don't look at it. If you have no clients or no kind of market impact, again, not interested. And if there's no development impact, so if it's simply just taking our funding and it's not societally relevant, again, not interested in funding. Okay, what about funding of an actual title? These become a bit more risky because it's almost placing a bet on a title as opposed to an actual studio. So again, what we're looking for over here, develop concept. So you've gone out, you've developed a concept either with your own funding or you've gone and you've secured development finance from somewhere. You've got a prototype, you've shopped it with a publisher, you've shopped it with some sort of a platform, for instance, and they kind of have given an indication saying, this looks good, let's go ahead with it. Perhaps there's a co-financier on board as well. And there's a clear plan which says, we're going to do this over the next 3 years, and here's the milestones. To get to silver status, to get a gold status, to get to a beta testing kind of point of view. This is how long it's going to take. This is how much of funding we require. That's what we're looking for from a funding of a title. What we'd fund in that space is actual the game dev. Maybe it's a basket of titles that we're looking for. We're platform agnostic, so whether it's PC, mobile, or an actual platform, doesn't matter. And again, I need to re-emphasize this: it's casual and serious games. What we'd avoid is if you come to us and you say, "I'd like to explore this concept. Do you have funding for such?" Unfortunately, not. Given that we only have repayable funding available to us, we can't inject concept development funding. If there's a team with no experience, again, not something that we can look at. And if I think overall, if the marketability of the product is pretty low, and there's no sense of actually selling this, not something that we can unfortunately look at. What do we want to see a bit more of? So we sit here as a finance house, which is, I suppose, a bit removed from the action and not fully in there, but this is what our observations are. The space within SA and the rest of the continent is that we're dealing with an industry which is fairly nascent and small and has the potential to scale, but at present it's in its infancy. We want to see more collaboration. So whether it's someone working in perhaps animation or fintech in a business banking kind of scenario, tap into those kinds of skills. Whether it's you working here in Cape Town dealing with someone out in Mombasa, or you dealing with someone in Accra or whatnot. Let's see that kind of collaboration. That's what we'd like to see more of. We like to see more inclusion. So again, from an SA perspective, we understand the kind of the environment and the thing kind of open to say, you come in, let's build this thing together. We're working in a space where, or within the SA itself, where I think you've got perhaps a formal government sector which might not be as agile as you'd like it to be. It may not see the full context of things as you'd like to see. But what's required then is for you as industry to collectively come together and lobby government a lot more. Don't wait for government to kind of wake up and say, this is how we're going to help gaming in the space. Try and push the agenda. Get together, lobby government strongly. We want to see more innovation in the space. So we aren't working in this continent. We aren't working with the kinds of access to capital that we have in Europe or North America, for instance. We also aren't working with maybe sometimes those kinds of excellent skills and that excellent kind of access to tech. We have slower servers here, for instance, or whatnot. But this can't be inhibitors or limiters to growing the space. What we want to see is more innovation. So find innovative ways of funding gaming, find even innovative ways of selling your game, find innovative ways of creating these. That's and that's what we want to see more. There's quite a bit of dev, or most of the dev done in Unity and Unreal and whatnot. But there's space for individual creators within the African diaspora, the African continent, to be making software of our own. Let's explore this. We'd love to see that. And finally, I've written in as great South African exports, but it's African exports I'm looking for. We want to see stuff made here, which is pushed out into the rest of the world, which is of quality, which is wanted, and which is taken up by the rest of the world. That's what we'd love to see. So I suppose that's my little talk on the gaming space. My details are as follows: Bhavanesh P at idc.coza. You can find me on LinkedIn, or just reach out to me over phone. If you need anything, just drop me a mail, and I'm happy to engage. Cool. Thanks very much.